The first thing that I did was I printed off all of the drawings from the plans, and I put them in this binder to keep them organized so I can follow them easily. The next thing I did was I cut out all the parts and drilled all the holes and countersunk for all the screws so that everything would be ready for assembly. I also took the time to write the part name right on the part. Now you don't have to do that in black magic marker, but I did it here so that it'll be easily seen. The next thing to do is to follow the steps 1 through 13 in the plans for assembly, and I'll get to that now. Now, the first step is to glue part B onto the bottom, like this. And to hold it accurately in place, we use the part F as a straight edge and a clamping guide. To avoid gluing this accidentally to the base, it's a good idea to chamfer the corner on this a little bit. So that any squeeze out doesn't glue part F on. So take this and put it on the bottom, line it up flush on the back, and put a couple clamps on it. And get some glue on here. Spread it out a little bit. Get a couple clamps on it. Now, it is very important to get this part exactly right. Everything else that comes after really depends upon this part being exactly right. Now, once it's glued in place, you want to take your square and make sure that this part is 90 degrees to that. It should be absolutely perfect, and here I'm pretty good. So I'm going to set this aside and let it dry for about 30 or 40 minutes. You know, go have a cup of coffee, whatever. Just leave this to dry. The next step is to clamp on part C and screw on part P. Part P is the wooden strip that goes across the front edge like this, and part C is 3/4 inch plywood that fits in here. Now, because I've got a little bit of glue squeeze out and I don't want to scrape it out, I'll just chamfer the back edge of this piece too. And it'll make it go in flush and even. So get some glue on that and clamp it in place. And make sure it's flush on the ends and clamp tightly against part B. Part P gets fastened with 2 1/4 inch wood screws. So I'm just going to take a clamp and clamp it in place. And drill a pilot hole, 1/8 inch pilot hole. And drive the screws. Alright, this has had a few minutes to dry. I can take the clamps off and move on to step 3. Step 3 is to glue on part D. I've already gone ahead and chamfered the back corner so that it clears the glue squeeze out and fits tight in the corner. So I glue that on, and I also glue on these 2 parts here. I've made a mark here to show where I put this one, and the other one lines up with this corner. put it in place, and get clamps on it. And once again, I'll leave it for the glue to dry for about a half an hour. Alright, step 4 is to glue on the deck, which is part F. And that just gets glued in place here, right on top of these other parts. Now, this is the time to check to make sure that you're flush across the top. And if you're not, make some adjustments, either this piece or part B, plane it down a little bit to make sure that you're absolutely flush across the top. The next step after gluing this one on is to screw this on, and it needs to sit flat. Alright, so I'm going to get some glue on the parts. And then clamp it down. And now we just have to wait for this to dry for a few minutes before we move on to the next step. Alright, the glue has had time to set on this part. We're still on step 4. And that's to screw this part on. This is the plastic main guide bearing. This part can also be made out of hardwood if you don't have access to this kind of plastic. So I'm going to line it up flush on this face and flush with the end and drill a pilot hole. Now I can drive 1 1/4 inch wood screw. Now you want to check to make sure that it's still flush on this face here and on the end. And you can make slight adjustments by slacking off the screw, pushing on the piece, and then retightening the screw. It's very important that the head of the screw be below the top surface of this. So then I'll just carry on and drill out and drive in the rest of the screws. And that's it for step 4. In step 5, we attach the advance lever and the cams. These are put on with 1 1/4 panhead screws and number 8 washers. The smaller cam goes here. The advance lever goes here. And the other cam goes here. Now it's a good idea to use a screwdriver to drive these screws, and this one you need it to move freely. It needs to spring back and forth like this. The cams, you can leave those loose for now because they need to be adjusted afterwards. Okay, in step 6, we're going to attach part L, which is the back fence, to part M, which is the side fence. And that gets glued and screwed together. I'm going to line this up so it's flush on the end and flush on the top. Then hold it through a pilot hole. then you can get some glue on here. Put the part in place. And screw it together with 2 1.5-inch wood screws. Drill another pilot hole and drive the screw. It doesn't hurt to take a square and check to make sure that you are square, that these 2 pieces are square to each other. And you can make adjustments in the same way as I showed earlier by loosening the screw, pushing the parts, and then driving the screw again. Check again, and that should be it. Next, the front bearing. Put that in place and line it up so that it's just slightly below the bottom of this, about a 32nd of an inch. Make a mark in here, drill a pilot hole on that mark, put the bearing back in, use the 3/16 washer and a 1 1/4 wood screw. It's also a good idea to drive this one by hand. And the final adjustment, this part may have to be shimmed out, or it might have to go deeper into the wood so that it properly contacts this front piece here. In my case, I need to shim it out probably a 32nd of an inch. Step 7, take the jig and add the fence to it, but we need to shim up the fence slightly. So what I'm going to do is use pieces of paper to do that. Here I've taken just normal printer paper and fold it over 4 times and then fold it over half again, and that gives me about a 32nd of an inch. And I'll put that in here. And put it in here. And under the side fence. Now push it down to make sure it's sitting properly. And then on the back of the fence, we're going to take part N and put it in place. Right on top of the bearing, right up against the fence. Now I'm going to carefully make a mark. I've got a very sharp pencil here. Carefully make a mark across the back of the fence. And that'll give me the place to screw part N in place on the back of the fence. So I'm just going to hold part N in place on the back of the fence, lining it up with the mark, and then drill pilot holes. And then drive 1 1/4 wood screws. Now you're going to check to make sure that you're still right on your mark. Drive in the other screw. Now once again, if you find that you're slightly offline, you can loosen the screw, move the piece back and forth, and then tighten it up again. You can glue this part on, but I really don't think it's necessary. Then we'll take the jig back and check to make sure that it's making good contact with the bearing. Okay, we move on to step 8. In step 8, we screw on part O right here and part X. It should be centered in the carriage like that. So I'll take the carriage off the jig and do this. Now it will probably make more sense to attach X onto N before you screw it in place here, because it's very tricky to drill the pilot holes. So I'm just going to take part N off temporarily and line up part X and drill the holes. And then part X gets attached with just 1-inch wood screws. Once again, the head of the screw needs to be below the surface of the top of the bearing here. And if the screws are a little bit too long and stick through the bottom, just take a file and rub them off. Like that. Now I can put part N back on. So then part O is just 1/2-inch plywood, and it gets screwed on flush with the top of part N like this. Just going to line it up, hold it in place, drill a pilot hole. And this gets attached with 1 1/4-inch wood screws. Now with part O in place, you can check to make sure that it fits on the bearing properly. It should be snug, but not too tight. In my case here, I'm a little bit too tight. It should move freely without any play. And I think that this is just a bit too tight. So to fix that, I'm just going to move the screw, and I'm going to put paper in here to shim it out. I'm going to fold the paper up 3 times. Slip it in here, and then retighten the screw. And I'll do the same on the other end. In a perfect world, we would cut all the parts exactly 100%, but as you know, that really doesn't happen. Okay, with the part shimmed out, I can try it again. Wow, that's a lot better. It needs to be, you need to be able to advance it with the advance lever easily. It should slide across without too much resistance, but it should not move around on the bearing. It should be snug. If you find that you do have some movement, take out 1 layer of paper, just as you need to. Okay, now we can move on to step 9. In step 9, we add part H and part G. Oh, H is upside down, like that. And these line up with a line that goes across. Now, in the drawings I show to make a mark across here. You can do that, or there's another way. The other way is to take part K, line it up flush with the bearing on this face, and then take part J, lay it down here, and use that to make your mark. And do the same on the other side. The reason for this is because eventually what happens is these parts go together and they need to be the same width as that. So it's better to do it this way. So H goes in place on this end, and that gets fastened with glue and 2-inch wood screws. So I've got my wood screws here. I need to make sure that my drill bit is going deep enough and drill pilot holes. With one pilot hole drilled, I can get some glue on part H. Put it in place right on the line and drive the screw. Now I can drill the other pilot hole and drive the other screw. And I'll do the same for G. G goes at the other end and is flush with the very end of the jig. Now it's time to put part V in place. Part V is a thin strip of wood, hardwood, that acts as a spring for the advance lever. Now if everything is made correctly, that should go up against this bump out part and glue and clamp to this part right here. The way the advance lever will work is that as you push it, it'll spring back like that. So get a little bit of glue on the end here. Make sure it's completely covered. Put it in place. And I'm just going to use a spring clamp to hold it on there. It's going to work a little bit better if it's up off the deck a little bit. And before you leave it, make sure that the advance lever works properly. Now it's very important that you leave this part to dry for a few hours before you take this clamp off. The glue on this part has to be absolutely dry before you take that clamp off, since it's already under stress. Alright, the next step is step 10, and in that step we work with part K and part I. These two get screwed together like this. The locking blade gets screwed onto part I like this. So the first step is to line up the locking blade onto the end of part I so that it's flush on the face here and flush on the top with the cutout part like that. And make a mark. It's kind of tricky doing this and showing it to the camera too. But basically what that does is puts a mark dead center of this piece and about a 1/2 inch in. Depending on the thickness of the plywood you use for part O, it might be a good idea to move this in, say, 1/16 of an inch. So that's what I'll do. Now I'll just drill a pilot hole in the end of part I here. And use a 1-inch wood screw to screw on the locking blade. The head of this screw has to be flush with the surface of the locking blade, so you might have to drill out your countersink a little bit deeper. And in my case, I think I do need to do that. So I'm going to take the screw back out again. And make the countersink a little bit deeper. Now you want to snug the screw in so that the locking blade still moves, but there should be some resistance. It shouldn't fall down. You should be able to swing it easily, but there should be some friction there. Now we'll take part I and screw it to part K like this. And these parts get glued together, so I'll put a little glue on here. Line up the part and screw it together with a 2-inch wood screw. Check to make sure that it's still flush. Drill the other pilot hole and drive the other screw. Now we can take this assembly and attach it to part G. You need the carriage in place for this because part K goes up against the back of the fence here. Put a little glue on here. And then use an 1.5-inch screw to hold it on. And drive the screw. Okay, step 11 is to get the division plate in place. Now you would slide that in from the end here. And make sure that the carriage is at the end where it's supposed to be. Slide the division plate in and then swing the locking blade down until it locks into the first notch in the division plate. Then at the opposite end you need to make a mark right at the very end. That'll show where the division plate ends against O. Swing the locking blade out of the way, slide the carriage out. Take the division plate out and line it up with that mark that you just made. Drill a pilot hole and drive the wood screw. Check to make sure you're still on the mark, make adjustments as you need to, then pilot hole on the other end, and drive a screw. The carriage can be slid back in to the jig. To the start position. Bring the locking blade down and it should lock in positively in the first notch. Next is step 12, and we're getting very close to the end right now. So that's to take part J and screw it to part K and part H. Now it goes in tight against the locking blade to give a little bit more friction. Now you don't put any glue on this part whatsoever. You want to be able to take this out in case something happens to the locking blade. If the locking blade breaks or something like, you want to be able to change it, so you need to be able to get this part out. And drive an 1.5-inch screw. And then there are two 2-inch screws that go into part K. And that's it for the basic assembly of the jig. The guide bar gets screwed to the bottom, flush on the back here, with 2 3/4 inch screws here, and 1 1.5 inch screw that goes up and into the main support of the jig. And that locks it in place and keeps it from moving. Some final checks are to check to make sure that you're square this way, that the back of the fence and the bottom of the jig are square to each other. If they're a little tiny bit off, it's not that big a deal, but there are ways to adjust it. The other thing is to check to make sure that the side fence here is square to the bottom as well. This bearing at the front needs to be adjusted so that it rubs on the bottom of the jig and it rubs against the front rail here. So in most cases it will have to be shimmed out. For this one, I think that number 8 washers might be enough to space it out. So I'm just going to lay those in there and check it. And that looks pretty good, so make sure they're in the right spot. Slip the plastic in, down against the bottom, hold it in place, and put the screw back in. Let's make it snug. Check to make sure that it's against the front rail and that it moves smoothly, and that looks good. The last test is to bring it back to the ready position, put the locking blade in place, and see how the advance lever engages. With the advance lever fully into the slot, I'm going to rotate this cam till it touches it, tighten it down, then release the locking blade and advance the carriage. Now it needs to advance exactly 1/4 inch so that when the locking blade comes down and swings back into the next notch, it's exactly 1/4 inch over. So you adjust this cam until it does that, and then tighten that in position. So every advance should bring it 1/4 inch over, and the locking blade should swing down and smoothly slide right into the notch. You do that all the way across to check it. Okay, so that's it. Fully assembled, just about ready for use. All I need to do is attach the guide bar to the bottom and set it up on my saw for the first cut. I'll have a video coming showing me doing that. That's it. Hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.